Hi, I'm Jin, comic writer and artist, creator of the webcomic series High School Romance and Saturday AM's Zero King of Thieves, and this is Making a Page. Welcome to the second episode of Making a Page, the YouTube series where I record myself drawing an entire page of comic and I talk about the process with you guys. This episode, we'll be watching the creation of page 7 of High School Romance, chapter 7. So, in this episode, we're going to start things a little differently. The last episode, I mentioned that I draw these little thumbnails before I actually go into drawing the full thing. So here is the thumbnail that I just had, and in manga they like to call it a name. I'm not sure why, but that's what they call it. But yeah, I'll refer back to the thumbnail a couple of times in this video so we can compare with what I originally drew, like as a really quick sketch, versus what the final product is. But it should be really interesting to see the difference there. And so here we are, another page of High School Romance, and I think you'll notice a pattern with these videos. A lot of them will be all High School Romance or all whatever comic I'm drawing at the time, because I'm only ever drawing one series at a time, so hopefully that doesn't get boring to you. But I think there's a lot of different things that we can talk about creating comic book pages, even within the same series. And so I decided to record this page because it's very different from the previous page that I recorded and you saw in my last video, because that one was, I would say, action heavy and dialogue light. I think there was only maybe one or two speech bubbles. This one is a very dialogue heavy page. It's going to be a lot of speech bubbles, and so I really wanted to highlight that because this is, I think, the most, I guess, for at least a lot of new creators, dialogue is something that they tend to forget, or they tend to underestimate how difficult it is to fit in a page, and obviously these things are really important. And so since this is a dialogue heavy comic book page, you can see I'm already putting the speech bubbles in, and that's because I have to make sure it fits, right? I can't just go into the final inking stage and then don't know where anything goes. And so you'll see here, like, I'm moving stuff around, I'm constantly editing, just like, how does this work? How does the flow of the dialogue work, which is really, really, really important. And yeah, so I just want to make things clear. We need to know who's saying what. We need to know in what order they're saying things. And so sometimes it's hard to read what's happening, and hopefully I do a good job. Like, I'm not going to say I'm the best in the world, but I like to try. It is really important. I think it's when somebody's starting off and doing their own comics, they don't necessarily think about it as much as they probably should. So yeah, just like the last episode I did, you can see that I'm taking full advantage of the fact that I do everything digitally, moving things around, resizing things, making sure that it all fits in properly. And this comes in super handy, especially when you're dealing with speech bubbles, because you have to make sure that they fit in, and so you can move things around and like make things smaller and stuff like that. So yeah, this page is sometimes, like, I get angry at myself for deciding to do a series in a high school, because it's just like I have to draw crowds all the time. And so I think maybe if you follow me on Twitter, you'll notice on the day I was drawing this, I actually wrote a tweet saying drawing comics is all about cutting corners. And yeah, what is the easiest way to draw a crowd of people without having to draw a crowd of people, but people know it's a crowd of people? These are the kind of things that you have to come up with. Yeah, and I don't know if you just saw that I spelled disappoint incorrectly the first time. It's really embarrassing. I just brought it up. You probably didn't even notice. Yeah. One thing you'll see about me, I'm really anal about lettering and speech bubbles. I think they're super important, and I like them looking good. And so you'll notice that like the text is always moving, the bubble tail, I don't know what it's called, or the tail of the speech bubble. I'm constantly like always moving things around. Like there has to be enough what I like to call like breathing room in the speech bubble. Yeah, I just like, I'm so mad, like crazy about speech bubbles. I think they have to look great. I'm really inspired by John Workman. He was like a legendary letterer. He used to work on like old Thor comics with Walt Simonson, but I found him out by the Sonic the Hedgehog comics. He was doing lettering for that, and it like, I don't know, he's great. You should check him out, John Workman. He like invented something, and I'll show you. Well, I don't know if he invented it, but he used it a lot, and it was a really big influence on me, and I'll show you that towards the end of the video because it's like a little final touch that I do, but I think it looks super awesome. But yeah, I love lettering. I think it's underappreciated how important good lettering is. People just sort of draw their comic and then just letter wherever. And so I think one of the great things about having that little thumbnail that I showed you before is that is your chance. Like you just put all your dialogue in there, and it's like, okay, there's a lot of dialogue here. I need to show these characters. What's the best way to all fit it in? And I think, you know, doing that stage is really important. So if you're just starting out and you want to be drawing comics, don't just draw the final page. Make sure you have a plan, because if you haven't, well, if you thought about the script already, I don't know what your process is, but if you have a script, and then you just sort of just draw the comic without thinking about that lettering and where the words and the speech bubbles go, what ends up happening is that you'll have, it will just, oh, well, here's my little thumbnail again, and as you can see, I've already put the speech bubbles in there. And if I didn't do that, what would end up happening is that I would just draw it, and then all of a sudden I realized, since you're not thinking about it, you've just drawn full panels and there's no space for any dialogue ever. Okay, another thing to point out here is that in my thumbnail, the last two panels have no dialogue. And in last minute, there was something that I really wanted to add. So now I'm changing things. So now there's even more dialogue, and so I had to try and think about where I'm going to put that in. Whether those last two panels are as good as they were before, I think they probably were better silent, but it was very important. Okay, so here, I didn't show this last time I did the episode, but this is me actually rendering out the 3D backgrounds, which I then superimpose onto my panels so I can draw backgrounds. You'll see that. So I just rendered them, and here I'm importing them, and I'm using the cool Clip Studio Paint stuff, and then that, boom, it has a background, and I didn't have to draw it out. But I will draw it out in the inking stage, because I do want to give that handmade feel like I just did it. And a lot of people might, like some people might consider this cheating, but you know, drawing comics is time consuming, and you have to figure out ways to do things. Like if I wanted to, I could have drawn that entire background, but I would have been here for hours. And so you have to try and figure out different tools that you can use to do things in a quicker way. And so since I studied 3D animation and 3D modeling at college, you know, I'm using that skill that I developed there to, you know, improve my comics. Here I am in the inking phase. I really like how Jukuhara, the Asian girl in this panel, turned out. I really like the sass and the attitude that I gave in her body language. Yeah. Again, I'm using the textured pen, the standard textured pen in Clip Studio Paint. I think it gives it a really nice feel, like I had done it pen on paper. Give that nice illusion. It's quite good. And see, now that I've already done the lettering, I can just sort of go balls to the wall and just, you know, draw the heck out of the page now. And it's another good thing as well, doing it this way, is that making sure that you have all your speech bubbles in, is that I don't all the space behind the speech bubbles, I don't even have to worry about it. What happens when you do it, say, the other way around, where you just draw the whole page and then you add the lettering in later, is that there's all this drawing and all this coloring or whatever you do that's just never going to be seen by the people who read the comic because it's hidden behind the text. And so if you do it this way, and I know that if you're working with an artist and a letter and it's a little bit different that way, they can't do it, but if you're working by yourself and you sort of know where everything's going to go, then you know, it's a really good way for you to save time, really, because drawing comics takes a long time. Yeah, it takes a long time, and so, like I said, cutting corners any way you can is a good thing to do. And, like, you know, why draw like a detailed background that no one's ever gonna see? You know, it just seems like, you know, a waste. Yeah. Already into the filling. I'll be drawing the backgrounds soon. Yeah, my crowds. My crowds of people that I couldn't be bothered drawing. You know, don't be ashamed when you're doing these things. You know, sometimes play to your strengths, I would say, when you're drawing your own comics. Like, one of my favorite comic artists is Chris Baccello, or Chris Baccello. I'm not entirely sure how to say his name. He does a lot of work for Marvel. I think he's currently doing Doctor Strange with Jason Aaron, if that's still going. And his backgrounds are just absolutely insane. But even though I love that, that's not my strong suit. And so I don't have to, you know, put that much. Like, just enough detail. Like, there are some people, you know, what's his name? I forgot, the guy who did Akira. If you see his background, it's like every single person has a facial expression and stuff like that, and you're just like, whoa. But, you know, if you don't have to do that kind of stuff. You know, it's cool if you can. But don't compare yourself necessarily to everyone. Your favorite people, because you have to work with your strengths. Yeah, that was a bit of a rambling of nonsense. And you can see here in the backgrounds, sometimes I use the ruler tool if it's like a really long line, but if it's not, what I like to do is just freehand the line. And I do that because, like I was saying before, I really want that feel as if I had just drawn it by hand. And so, yeah, so I just, you know, freehand some lines in the background just to, because if it's too perfect, and you match that with my style, with how our characters are drawn, it seems a little out of place. And so, just making it a little bit loose, it just sort of feels like, oh yeah, he actually did that. So a fun fact, the reason why I went with, if you've read through my whole series, you'll notice that I've done like a one color per chapter. The first time I started coloring the first page of High School Romance, and maybe, I think I have it somewhere, maybe I could show one day. It was actually full color. But what ended up happening there is that it was taking too long per page. Like, I don't want to spend that much time working on a page, and so I knew that I wanted color. I didn't want it to be black and white for whatever reason. But I also didn't want to spend a crazy amount of time each page, like, you know, writing it, penciling it, inking it, coloring it. And so I decided to go with this pick a color for every issue. And so, you know, that's why High School Romance has a thing like that. And it's all done in the sort of like a rainbow. So the first issue is pink, the second issue is red, the next issue is orange, the next issue is yellow, the next issue is green, then blue, and now purple is the last one. And then if, for example, if it kept going, then the next color would be pink, and then it would be that loop. And I just thought the reason behind that is I thought it would be cool if they were all on the shelf together. It'd be cool to see the color slowly change. Some people have picked it up on Webtoon, some people not. But yeah, that's why. There's no other really deep and dark. So here we are. Here's my little thumbnail again. So you can see that it's basically still the same. So everything, all the elements that I had there in that thumbnail, and this is really small. Basically on an A4 piece of paper, I do 4 pages. And so that gives you an idea of how small that thumbnail is. And doing the thumbnail small lets you basically forget about all the useless stuff. If you do something at a much larger size, then you start thinking about, you know, little details that no one's ever gonna notice. And it's not to say that you shouldn't do those little. Oh yes, see, now what I'm doing is that I colored in. You can see it here. So this is the whole page. See those beach bubbles? How they blend into the border? That was from John Workman. So yeah, I stole that from him. So this is the whole thing. A lot of dialogue. But I think it doesn't get in the way of the art, and that's all because of that planning that I did at the beginning. In a second here, we're going to have a little comparison with my original thumbnail, or the name, if you're into manga. Here we go. Here's the original, and this is what it ended up like. And as you can see, a lot of it's there except for the extra dialogue. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode of Making a Page. I hope you enjoyed, and make sure you let me know what you think. See ya! If you enjoyed this episode of Making a Page and would like to see more and content like it, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Make sure you check out my comic, High School Romance. You can read it all for free at highschoolromancecomic.com or on Webtoon. If you want to learn more about Zero, King of Thieves, and other cool series, make sure you check out Saturday AM. And if you'd like to support me and get some cool, early, and exclusive content, please consider supporting me on Patreon, where only $1 will access all of my Patreon perks. And finally, you can catch me on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @JazzyJin, or on my Discord server. All the links you could possibly need will be in the description below. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next video.